Hi, it's office hours. Ask me anything. While I get set up, we've got a new link because I don't have a tool that can put links on the screen. We have a new link for anyone who wants to ask questions anonymously. You can always ask them in LinkedIn or live on YouTube, but if you don't want us to see who you are or where you work, maybe you want to complain about your job, ask here. It's just a question form and it'll go right to my email, and I promise to keep it as anonymous as your question is. So deltacx.link is my URL shortener, AMA for Ask Me Anything. Head over there while I get set up and open up the chat room and look for everybody's questions. So as usual, please ask your questions. And let's see, I'll also put that in the thing here. Let's see. So we ask me anything at deltacx.link/AMA. So we've got a few people joining. I'll also open up the YouTube chat room. So if anyone wants to join there, I'll be looking for questions there as well. And as usual, this is any questions you have about CX, UX, getting your work done, fighting with people at work, transitioning into the industry. Everything's absolutely welcome. All questions are welcome. This is Ask Me Anything. And I do this pretty much every Tuesday around this time, travel and other things permitting. I'm also wearing the dirtiest sweatshirt I have, so please don't judge me. See some people are starting to join. Hello, everybody. As I slurp my hot tea, hope everybody's doing well and keeping cool or warm, depending upon where you live. Again, as usual, all questions are welcome, but I'm going to start with a question that I received ahead of time through the new Ask Me Anything form. So remember, if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can ask that way. If it doesn't have to be anonymous, you're welcome to type it right here in LinkedIn or YouTube, where everyone will see it. So here's the question that I got. Hi, this might be a dumb question. Hey, there are no dumb questions. Here it goes. How do you deal with people that think they know what CX UX is and try to erode confidence in it within an organization? You know, people with a loud voice that just don't know what they're talking about and people actually listen to them. It's a great question. First of all, it's definitely not a dumb question. And really you're saying, at my job, UX maturity is very low. People really don't know what UX is, but they have a guess as to what it is and they're wrong. And so they're claiming, do this, don't do that, do this. And people are listening to the people who don't know anything. And I think it's implied here that people either aren't listening to you or they're not asking you anything. They're not trying to listen to you. So I don't have a fantastic answer to this because my answer would be clean up that resume, polish up your LinkedIn, and be actively applying for jobs. It is very hard to improve the maturity of an organization. It's a lot of that is what my book is about, but even so, it's still hard. And if people really want to cling to their incorrect information about UX, it may not be something that you can change. You know, confirmation bias, and you know other cognitive biases, and you know when people get really comfortable with bad information, sometimes they don't want to change that information towards something that is better or truer. So some things that you can try to do, and that I didn't know from your question, are you the only UX person in the organization? Do you have a manager? Is your manager a UX expert, or is your manager from some other team like marketing, product, engineering? If you have a UX manager, I would say this is their job. So first of all, this shouldn't fall to you, especially if you are mid-level or junior and not senior principal lead hire. So first of all, the manager should be stepping in. Now, if your manager isn't from UX, but kind of gets UX, I think, the next question would be, does anyone at the company get UX? Even a little bit. Or do they all have these incorrect ideas of, hey, we just ask users what they want, and hey, we just have anybody make a wireframe? Does anybody there get UX? Because maybe that person can be your ally. Sometimes it can be a non-UX expert. It could be a product manager's manager who really does care about the product and does care about the customers and not just the stakeholder, and cares about the customer value of what we're building. Maybe that is a person to try to connect with and say, look, there's all these people here and they think they understand CX and UX and they really don't. And I don't know how to go about changing that. What can you and I do together that can start to push the boat out? It's hard because then people want to evangelize. They want to call a meeting and say, here's what UX is. And I have a one-day training that I go to companies in this situation and do. So I know it sounds like I'm selling something, and hypothetically I'm selling something, but that is one thing you can do, is bring me in for this training, because I do also find, whether you're bringing me or somebody else with a similar message, I do find that sometimes when you bring in an outside trainer, coach, consultant, whatever they're calling it, that person is sometimes taken more seriously, listened to a little bit more than the internal people that we have. For whatever reason, sometimes people have decided these internal people we have aren't really experts. It also depends on what level you are, but magically you start paying a trainer, a coach, a consultant, and all of a sudden, whoa, maybe we should listen to this person. So I have a one-day training program. You can see it on deltacx.com. I think I've made a printout for that as well. I made a bunch of printouts because I can't do on-screen graphics. So over at deltacx.com, you can check out under training, Dev and UX. And it's my training for non-UX roles, not just developers, to learn what is UX, why are we specialized, why should only we be doing our work, how do we fit into software development, how are we truly agile and lean, not following some of the crap that's out there that claims to be agile or claims to be lean but isn't. So that is my suggestion. Again, it doesn't have to be me, but be careful what other trainers' messages are, because I have heard that there are some trainers whose messages would not help you right now. Let's put it that way. Some trainers whose messages are more about, let's just make everybody at the organization a UX designer, or let's teach everybody to do UX, or let's bring in more team workshops to design by committee. Be very careful if you do look for an outside trainer or coach or consultant that their message is going to match the message you are hoping they deliver. So work with that person up front on what their message is, because I've seen good messages that I think will help a company better understand UX and maybe get it a little bit more right, or be in a position to start seeing who you are and why you're there. And I've certainly seen a mountain of training, including from authors and gurus and speakers and people we think we're supposed to like. But when I thought critically about what their training was, and the best way to think critically about their training is to say, if their message came true, if what they're claiming they're going to teach people to do or be really happened, if everybody became a UX designer, if everybody thought they could do UX, if everybody were fluent in UX, whatever their claim is, if that happened, would that make your job better? Would that fix your problems? Would that create new problems? So these are some things that you can ask yourself critically when reviewing other training, other speakers, other coaches, whatever the case may be, and even mine as well. You can certainly, please think critically about everything I say and everything I put out there. I am not exempt from this. The advice is everybody think critically about everything. Today is office hours, Ask Me Anything. You are welcome to ask questions live in the LinkedIn chat as well as the YouTube chat. Or if you have a question you would like to ask anonymously, like our last question, because that was clearly about someone's current job and they wouldn't want to ask it in the chat room, you can use this link and it will shoot me a quick email with your question, and then I can answer it without giving away any of your information about who you are or where you work or things like that. Let's see, also checking if there's any messages from anybody or anything else? So nope, looks like no other questions. So again, this is office hours. Ask me anything. I'll hang out for a few more minutes. If there aren't any questions, I can certainly wrap it up. But if you do have questions, please ask them. All questions are welcome, whether it's about careers, portfolios, problems at work, something you're working on, things like that. I'm here to try to give some free help and drink my tea. I generally don't like tea, but it's winter and I do like this tea. I'm not sponsored by tea. Our good friend Steve, who I believe is in the UK, but I didn't click on his thing. I'm doing that from memory. Our good friend Steve wants to know, what changes to the UX industry do you see coming in the next 5 to 10 years? You know, Steve, I try not to think out that far because we really don't know. We're all guessing. I'm usually pretty good at predicting, but I think the UX industry could end up going one of two ways depending upon what we do in the next year or two. And that's why I'm calling for people to kind of join the Delta CX movement and speak up more to make sure UX is empowered and that we're not falling for all of these fake methodologies that I like to call aspirologies that kill our autonomy and things like that. So I can see two directions happening based on what happens in the next year or so. I think UX could end up being tremendously strengthened. And I'm calling for us to call it more CX. I think UX has a branding problem. It's so misunderstood, but yet CX has a lot of respect and budgeting. So got to shift over a little bit. So I think CX, UX, whatever we call it, it could end up better understood, better respected. And I do believe that over time, companies will get better at assessing talent. I don't think they could be worse than they are now. Companies are pretty bad in general at assessing who can do UX. They look at portfolios, they don't know. You can't really tell from a resume, of course. So I think companies are going to have to get better at that, or they're going to have to bring in outside consultants and experts, people who are heads of UX or agency people who can say, yeah, you're trying to hire, you don't know what you're doing, let us help you out. It's not that expensive, we'll review these people. So I think there's one track where UX becomes a little bit more understood, where customer centricity isn't bull poop and it's a true focus for companies, and they will care about customer value and go in that direction. But I can also see things going in another direction, again, depending upon what happens really in the next year or two. I think that meaningless buzzwords like design thinking can overtake and overshadow what we're doing and what we're trying to do. And things like that dilute us. They confuse people about what UX really is. I mean, if everyone's a design thinker, are we all doing UX? Are we all doing CX? Is the design thinking process enough of a UX process? I think design thinking is one of those things that sounds like it's going to be great evangelism and sounds like it's going to get everybody involved in wanting to talk more about design, but I think it ends up evangelizing itself. And I think when everybody is a certified design thinker and things like that, we do run the risk that the other possible future for UX is it gets super watered down, it gets super muddied, it gets absorbed into other stuff. It's no longer really a specialty. And we end up with a world where a lot of our jobs disappear. I've got a question coming in from Oz, one of my favorite people, but LinkedIn is only showing me a piece of it. Here we go. Oz, by the way, is a fantastic, fantastic speaker and instructor himself, someone worth following on LinkedIn. Check him out. And he focuses a lot on Microsoft Excel. So if you want to know anything about Excel, and especially if you want to kill bad data, he is your guy. He says, how will all this privacy stuff impact UX? For me, websites are getting more and more annoying with privacy update announcements and cookie acceptance pop-ups and join our email and can we send you browser alerts? Oz, I don't have good news for you, because while almost everybody out there is predicting that 2020 is the year for privacy to improve and ethics are going to be better, I'm actually predicting the opposite. I'm predicting that it's going to get worse before it gets better. I believe it eventually will get better, but I don't think it's going to be this year. So I think that while we do have obviously laws here in Europe, new laws in California and other places. I still think that every company is going to wring us out as much as they can until enough laws or regulations come up where they have to stop. But I think until they have to stop, they're going to keep doing it in every way they can. I think ethics are currently mostly out the window. I think they don't care about privacy or data protection or bad actors at all. So that's another thing I'm calling for, is for UX to work with engineering and security and legal and other people to brainstorm what bad actors might do, so that we are prepared with our architecture and design, both on the UX side and the technology side. So Oz, I don't have a great answer for you. Hello, Julio. I don't have a great answer for you, because I'm with you on that, and I hate it too. And I've noticed, in fact, I think the ballsiness, if I can say that, of many websites is getting worse. What I find now is if I won't agree to cookies, I can't even go to the website. They're just like, F you. If you're not going to let us place cookies and read your stuff and do this and that, well, you know, you can't see this website. Sometimes it kicks me to the company's homepage. Sometimes it kicks me to Google. I had an amazing interaction a week or so ago. A woman on LinkedIn posted a job that looked fantastic. I got very excited about it because I am looking for something. I don't just podcast all day. I do a lot of writing, but I don't have a regular job right now, and I certainly wouldn't mind one. So I saw this great job, and she said, just go to this website and see our jobs and apply if you like it. And I got to the page and there were no jobs there. And I wrote back and I said, I'm sorry, but I don't see any jobs on your page. And she was like, well, I see them there. And I was thinking, thing one, you're the director of UX. You need a better answer than it works for me. It's not working for me. And what happened was, the first thing that had come up before I saw the jobs was, do you agree to all of our cookies? And I unchecked the non-necessary cookies. You know, you have to leave checked whatever they claim are the mandatory cookies, but I unchecked marketing, communication, a couple of other ones. It was checkboxes. And that's when I didn't see the jobs. And I found that if I did allow the cookies, I could see the jobs. And my thought was, I don't want to work there. I don't care how good that job looked. I don't care how great that company might have been. I don't know how wonderful that woman might have been as a boss. I don't want to work there, because we shouldn't do this to people. And this was a UX agency. Like, really no excuse here. No excuse for this to have not been tested with browsers that are blocking cookies. No excuse to say it just works for me. And no excuse to block me from potentially applying for a job because I didn't want to accept your cookies. So Oz, unfortunately, I think that, and again, this is Ask Me Anything office hours. Please ask live in the LinkedIn chat or YouTube chat, or if you want to ask anonymously, go to my new link where you can fill out a quickie form that's totally anonymous, and that way you can complain about your current job without anybody knowing. Oz, I don't have good news for you. I think that this year it's going to be a little bit more brazen before there is any, again, Facebook and all these people are pretty much completely unregulated. There's no incentive for them to change. Oz, no matter how right you are about this and how much of a good point you have and how much you and I can keep saying this and other people join us in this, it's not happening yet. I just don't see it happening yet. So I think it's going to take time for some of these laws to come into effect. And I think it's going to take time for these companies to decide this matters to me. I'll give you another example. I have a trademark application that's in progress, and that database is public. So all day long, I get spams from lawyers who want to be my lawyer for my trademark. And there's no way for me to opt out, literally. Most of these emails are just an email, and there's no way to opt out. How is that still okay? Oz follows up his question and says, I'm asking more from the perspective of just the UX and the annoyance of going to a site, even if I don't care about privacy. Websites are just getting more annoying. Yeah, ballsiness. Is there any way for UX or CX to intervene? Fantastic question from Oz. Absolutely wonderful. And the answer is yes and no. So here's the thing. Is there a way for CX and UX to intervene? We hope there is. There should be. But when ethics at a company are already compromised, we're already up that creek. If you want to read something interesting, Oz, take a look. Google for Mike Robinson Superhuman. Superhuman is one word. Mike Robinson's a guy who wrote an article about an email client called Superhuman. Now, ultimately, you may not care about him or Superhuman, but he makes one of the greatest points of 2019, period. He could have written a whole book about this. I would have bought it 10 times, but he wrote one blog post, and I want you to see that. And what he does is he defines something that he calls the decision genome. And basically, it's his way of saying, once ethics is compromised at a company, it's in that company's genome, and it gets used as a precedent for other bad decisions. And so he talks about how if your company starts making customer focus that mess with privacy, as you're saying, that's used as a precedent when the company says, should we do this other crappy thing to our customers? I don't know. Well, we did that last crappy thing. Oh, okay. Well, then this must be okay too. So can UX and CX intervene in a case like that? We can try. But the problem is, if people don't believe in us, if they don't give us power, if they don't agree with our ethics or our approach, then we are usually circumvented, overruled, ignored, fired, magically our budget gets cut. I've seen it all, Oz. And great question, by the way. Again, ask me anything, everybody, if this is Ask Me Anything. So let me know if you have a question. Ask it here, or let's see, is anybody asking a question in YouTube? Not yet. Thank you to our one viewer, who is usually my boyfriend. Are you my one viewer today?
No.
You're not my one viewer. That's wonderful. Okay. I've got a real YouTube viewer today that isn't my boyfriend. Hi, YouTube viewer. But 16 of us are on LinkedIn. So Oz, I can't fix this one, but I do know that more and more people are speaking up. So I believe it will shift, but I don't see that shift happening this year. There aren't enough we're not on fire enough, Oz. We're not feeling enough pain. Companies aren't feeling enough pain for them to make changes. That is a downside. Feel free to give me a follow-up if I'm not going in the right direction with what you're asking. And all questions are welcome, everybody. If you have any other questions, Steve, if you have a follow-up question, Julio, you come every time. You're so sweet. If you have a question, let me know. I'm going to look up Mike Robinson's blog post, and I'm going to post it in the chats. And let's see if I can find it. Mike Robinson. Okay, Superhuman is spying on you. That is the name of the blog post. It's from June 2019. I loved this blog post. It really influenced me. I ended up including it in my book, of course, crediting Mike. Even though I didn't have any interaction with him, of course, I gave him credit for this. Let me paste it in on LinkedIn. I've added it to. Yeah, thanks, Oz. Yeah, so the problem is once the decision, I've had a couple of really sweet people on Facebook. I'm sorry, I don't believe in Facebook. On LinkedIn, come to me privately and say, hey, I have an interview at Facebook. And I know you're not a big fan of Facebook. And I say, surely not. I deleted it 2 years ago, and look how productive I am. And they say, well, I don't like a lot that Facebook's doing either, but I think if they hired me, maybe I could make a change. And I say, look, I love you for that. I love you for your heart. I love you for your ethics. I love you professionally and platonically for what you dream you can create if you worked at Facebook. But you are up against a huge machine, and you're up against a machine that right now doesn't want to change. And it's not just Facebook. We're hearing the same things about Google. We're hearing things about other companies. So can you fix the machine? Probably not. You didn't break the machine. You can't fix the machine. I appreciate your intentions, but I do know some people who worked at Facebook hoping they could make it a better place and left and felt hurt, disillusioned, angry, something negative, because they really thought they were going to be able to change what Mike Robinson calls the decision genome. And once it is your genome, it is unlikely to change. It's going to be used as precedent. I'll look up another example while I wait for you guys to ask me any more questions, but this is Office Hours Ask Me Anything. And as usual, I'm taking absolutely any question you have about UX. You can see Oz's question was even a great one, but both Oz and Steve really asked about the future. So we've got future on our minds today, fresh in early 2020. And I am just going to pull up the Kindle version of my book because I want to read you something that I found that ended up in my book that I just don't have in front of me. And oh, come on. Come on, that is not correct. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, got it. All right, let's see if anybody has any other questions while I'm waiting. Otherwise, I'll read this to you. So here's what I'm talking about. And again, I'm focusing on Facebook. They're an easy target whenever you want to talk about ethics concerns, privacy concerns, things like that. Facebook's an easy target. I'm happy to talk about other ones if you have good examples, but here's what I'm talking about. So I'm going to share my screen, in fact, just so you can see this piece from my book. Share, Kindle version, share. So this is an ad that I saw in a taxi in Berlin. And I'm trying to move some stuff around here. View, page, and zoom, 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 so everybody can see it clearly. This was an ad I saw in a taxi. And this was the back of the headrest, the passenger seat. So this is facing me. And this was in Berlin. This was mid-2019. My German is not fantastic, so I put it through Google Translate, and I made the best out of it that I could. But of course, anyone who speaks German knows what this says, but this is my best approximation of this, and here's what it says. We make sure Facebook stays safe in elections and otherwise. We lock fake accounts before they can do any harm. We fight against the spread of fake news and create more transparency in political advertising on Facebook. And as you can see from what my book says, I don't believe it for a minute. Boo. Did you believe it? Did you believe it just because they said it? So we've got a new question, so I'll shift away from that for a moment. Welcome, Scott Kim. Scott Kim says, I'm new to your work. Well, welcome, Scott. What does CX stand for, and why do you prefer it? So we've got UX, which is the user experience, and we've got CX, which is the customer experience. And you might say, customers, users, what's the difference? Isn't this the people we do business with or hope to? Sure. To me, these definitions are pretty close. Here's the difference. At many companies right now, UX is completely misunderstood. People really don't know what it is. They think if you bring in an artist to draw a pretty picture of a screen, that's UX. And they skimp on a lot of really important things. However, where companies have a CX team or CX department or CX whatever, well, that is something we invest in. We invest in customer support, customer service, customer metrics, customer satisfaction, customer whatever it is. And there are many people out there who say, well, the original definition of UX was absolutely everything that touched the customer and it was involved in their decision to do business or not do business with us. Their thoughts, their emotions, their choices, their physical interactions with our brand, like in a store or with an object. Here's a giant object I have. But UX was originally supposed to mean that, but somehow over time, its definition changed and it ended up meaning screens. UX ended up meaning the research, design, testing, iteration of digital screens, whether those are phones, watches, thermostats, Tesla, dashboards. And CX ended up meaning the whole overarching experience that people have with a brand. So the example I like to give that I give in my book, so people have heard this one already, is think about a hotel. When you are booking that hotel on the website or in an app, that's a digital experience. So traditionally, this was called UX, and the UX team built those experiences. But very often a UX team has nothing to do with anything else that company does. Yet so many of us care about what kind of service did the person get when they went to check in? What did their room look like, smell like? What kind of restaurant did we decide to install or put into this hotel. So obviously not everybody's going to be involved in every decision that gets made, but many of us are really looking at that whole experience that the customer has. Not just, hey, were they able to do this thing on this screen? Great, done. We're really in an omni-channel world now where someone who hates your website is probably not going to your hotel, and someone who hates your hotel is probably not going to your website. Therefore, these things are more connected than they ever have been before, but in many companies, they are siloed. So I'm calling for people to start phasing out the word UX, even though it does exist above my head. I'll be getting a new backdrop. Start phasing out the word UX just because it has a branding problem. It is misunderstood. Too many people think it is a graphic designer drawing some wireframes and laying out a screen, and we're not investing in all of the steps and time it would take for experts and junior experts to be really getting to know our customers, researching what they need, and architecting and designing the best thing from start to finish, wherever that start is and wherever that finish is. So I'm calling for us to shift our language towards CX, but again, while UX is so known in our circles and something that's on a lot of our job titles for now, I can't completely drop that term. I hope that made sense. Please ask a follow-up question. Again, this is office hours. Ask me anything. If you want your question to be anonymous, use the link. Follow-up questions are welcome. Clarifications are welcome. So if you guys have another question, please do ask it. Scott, hopefully that helps. I only see a little bit of your LinkedIn thing. It says Puzzle Master Educational Game. I guess that says designer, but it says ... It's truncated. I don't know how the story ends, Scott, but I assume you two are some sort of designer in educational games. So something, something for you to think about. You might be part of our world. Any other questions? Let's check YouTube. We had one lonely viewer there. Hello, lonely YouTube viewer. No questions in YouTube, so back to LinkedIn. Anybody there? Let's check email if any anonymous questions have come in. No anonymous questions have come in. So again, I hang around here until we run out of questions. We are about 30 to 60 seconds delayed from when I'm talking, from when you see it. So I'll just hang around a little bit more and see if anybody comes up with any questions. Again, all questions are welcome. It could be about UX careers, problems you're having at work. That's probably better for the anonymous questions. Thanks, Scott. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Don't forget a couple of other things. While I wait for questions, a couple of plugs. Don't forget on the Delta CX website, there's more information about my book, the training, consulting, and other things that we can do for you and your company, or you might just want to read my super fun book. I am working on an audio book. I am going to edit out mistakes. I've recorded about 15% of the book, so I'm talking as much as I can, kids. My goal is to try to be done with it at the end of January, but I have no idea. A couple of other signs to hold up for you guys. Free portfolio reviews are still available for those of you who are looking for work. These are completely private. I just send me your portfolio link through this appointment system, and I will record a video of me, not a public video, private video of me looking at your portfolio and saying where it's going right and going wrong, and then I send you the video. So totally private, does not happen on the live stream unless you would like it to. And for those of you who feel like you need much deeper mentoring for any particular reason, you could be in your first job and you are struggling. You could be taking a course or trade school or boot camp and they are not reviewing your work enough and you are guessing at work. I do offer mentoring time, but it is currently paid because all of my free mentoring universe is full right now and I can't afford to give everybody mentoring time for free. However, my mentoring time is greatly discounted over my usual hourly rate. So it is $50 for a half hour. And of course, that time is spent however you want. We can be talking about processes. We could be talking about your work, your real job, or prepping for an interview, totally up to you. We've got a new question. Dhruv. I'm sorry, I may not have pronounced that very well. Dhruv. You tell me how to pronounce that. Yikes. I'm so sorry, I'm bad at names. Hey, Debbie, hope you are doing well. I hope you are doing well. Can you please tell, what are the core skills you consider one should have to work as a UX UI developer or designer? Well, there's a lot of questions packed into there because you've got UX skills, you've got UI skills, you've got development skills, and you've got design skills. So I'd say pick one, decide what you're doing. So when you say UX or UI developer, do you mean a front end coder like HTML, CSS, JavaScript? Write back and let me know if that's what you're talking about. Are you talking about front end dev, or are you talking about more of the full CX UX spectrum where we're looking at research, information architecture, interaction design, testing, and iterating back on those? So if you can give me a little follow-up there and tell me what you meant so that I can answer it more specifically, that would be great. I don't want to go in the wrong direction and start yapping. Well, you just wrote yes. You just wrote yes. So I'm assuming that's for developer. Sorry, I almost inhaled my tea. So unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you because I am not a developer. I used to write HTML and CSS, but it was not something I felt I was very strong in. So now I hire people to do that. So that means that I am not aware of what are some of the best skills to know or some of the best languages to know. I would pass that off to someone else who is more of a programmer or front-end developer. I am definitely more in the rest of UX. My specialties are kind of everything but programming and art. I'm not a visual designer. Again, I used to do the coding, don't really do it anymore. So I do not have a good answer to what core skills should people know if they want to do UX development or front-end dev. If anybody is listening in, we've got 20 people in LinkedIn and one in YouTube. Hello, one YouTube. Please feel free to write in if you have a good answer for this question. If you are an engineer or work with UX engineers or front-end devs, maybe you can tell us what some of the better languages are where you think people should have. And he's following up the question and saying he also works as a UX UI designer. So typically when someone says they are a UX UI designer, I tend to assume that you are an artist, a visual designer who has an interest in UX, but UX might not really be your strength. I'm guessing that. I have no idea, but I'm going to look at your LinkedIn now. Okay, so previously you did UI development, iOS app development, graphic design, computer engineering degree. Okay, so you seem to be very, very heavily a graphic designer and a developer, possibly, so let's see, looks like iOS was a little bit new to you a few years ago, and UI development. So that's what your personal profile looks like, person who asked the question. So if you were looking to shift more into UX, my first question, of course, would be why? What is it about UX that you want to do? And I don't know how much UX you're doing now, because again, I find a lot of people who do graphic design and UI are sure they're doing UX, but when I look at their portfolio, I end up saying, oh, holy cats, I don't think you're doing UX. This thing you keep saying, it does not mean what you think it means. So if you want to work in UX, people like me and people unlike me are usually looking for real UX skills, primarily in the area of cognitive psychology. So it's important to learn some cognitive psychology. That's really at the core of a lot of CX and UX approaches and work, is a deep understanding of people, being able to predict some of their natural behaviors, being able to understand cognitive biases and things like that. So in short. So I would say at the core of real UX work would be to study more cognitive psychology. Additionally, depending upon what you like, you might want to learn more research methods to make sure that your interviewing skills are always getting better, that your observational research is always getting better, and how you interpret that data and how well you can write a report that is compelling with the right amount of information. And then on the testing side, of course, if you're thinking more testing, then you're looking at testing methodologies, the correct planning of testing, the correct interpretation of testing, and things like that. So when you say you followed up by saying, I love solving problems of users and creating user-centered design. And again, I find a lot of artists say that to me, but when I say back to them, how? How are you doing that? What is your process or approach? Very often, and again, I don't know you, so you could say anything, but very often when I ask a graphic designer or artist, what's your approach to solving users' problems and creating user-centered designs? Typically I hear, I make wireframes in Sketch, or I make beautiful usable designs. And I don't hear about the real core of UX work, which is that great research. How you say you love solving the problem of users, how do you know what their problems are? Were any of those problems guesses, assumptions, guesses or assumptions made by you, guesses or assumptions made by the boss, guesses or assumptions made by some other teammate? We have to be careful that we are solving the right problems for the right people. So believe me, I hear all day long, I love solving problems for users. I design with users in mind. I hear this all the time, but I don't believe it until I see it. And when I look at someone's portfolio, I can tell if they really are solving problems for customers or if they are guessing at problems and then stabbing at the best solution to a guessed problem. So I would say, depending upon what you're into and depending upon what's lacking for you, because I don't know you well enough to say where your strengths or weaknesses are, I would say that if you love UX and you want to be doing more UX stuff, you have to make sure you are using a real UX process and approach with depth, with quality, not just checking something off a list and saying, I asked a customer what he wants, so I did research, done. I would say that's not research. You know, that's not what we do. So there may be an opportunity for continuing education here. It's too long of a list for me to say every skill that you could possibly have. UX is very broad, but I would say that depending upon what you're interested in, you can't go wrong studying more cognitive psychology, and you can't go wrong studying more research techniques. He says, I first conduct interviews with users to get verbal and nonverbal information and create personas, then create user journey and create wireframes. And again, without seeing your work, that sounds good, but if I saw a portfolio, I would be able to assess, do I believe you're doing this well or correctly, or do I believe you're doing this in a flawed way, a biased way, an incomplete way, but the way that you describe your approach sounds good, so I can't complain about the way you describe it, but of course I can tell from a portfolio, at least from my interpretation, and it's just one person's opinion, I can tell from a portfolio how much somebody is really doing UX versus saying these things. Because I looked at what, 50 portfolios just before the new year, and many of them were absolutely sure they were doing really deep and fantastic UX work. And I found that out of nearly 50 portfolios, 4 people were. So, and that's just because they're coming from different industries and they went to bad schools. So it's not their fault. They might be very dedicated and care very much about this, but their education was lacking. And again, not their fault. So if you want a portfolio review, please sign up for one. Otherwise, I'm happy to take other questions here. You know, I've been going for 42 minutes. I try not to go over an hour, but I can stop at any time. Really, I can. We've got 21 people in LinkedIn and still we've got 2 people in YouTube. Is one of them you? Still not my boyfriend. Thank you. 2 real people in YouTube this time. Cheers to you guys. This cup of tea is for you. I'm going to take a sip of tea, but please continue to ask any questions you guys want. I'll do my best to answer them. Silence. It's like white space. I just completed my certification in UX research and analysis, but haven't implemented my knowledge. Okay, so that's going to take some time and probably more practice, because just because you got a certification in something, certainly you're not an expert yet. How can you start? How can you start implementing your knowledge? Couldn't you do that at your job? Your LinkedIn says you currently have a job as a senior UX UI designer and developer. So do it. You got the job. Do the things. I guess I don't understand your question. You work in UX UI. You've just learned new things about research approaches. Put them to work at your job. Find a way, speak to your manager, find a way to be more involved in the research, or to get extra time. Say, hey, I'd like a week or two to do some extra research before I start designing and developing. And here's what the outcomes and outputs of that are going to be. And here's why, yes, that's going to take time up front, but here's why it's going to save us more time and money later, because of better understandings of the customer and better approaching of customer value once we really understand who these people are and what they need. So that would be how I would start. You know, you seem to be working in a place now that where you're doing UX and UI. So I would be finding ways to work it into what you're doing now. And hopefully there are managers or seniors there, maybe someone more senior to you, who might be able to review some of that research work or partner with you on it, and check your work and make sure that you did it well. Because I find that just because somebody got certified in something doesn't mean it's good at it. But it's more like development than UX. That's why I'm so confused. Well, good news, you've confused me as well. If you're saying, okay, if you're saying that your job title is senior UX UI developer, and you're telling me you do UX and UI design at this job, but you're telling me you're really more of a developer, first of all, you've confused all of us. But second of all, I don't know what to tell you. It sounds like your job isn't to do research. I don't know if it's anybody's job at your company to do research. And so I would say this is something you have to talk to a manager about, a UX manager. Is there a UX manager you can talk to about starting to do more research? That's going to be hard. Very often developers are judged by how much coding they did that week. And if you start doing less coding to do more research, someone's not going to be happy. So I'm not sure you're in a great place, but that wouldn't stop me from trying. You can also message me privately, and I'll try to continue with you, since you seem to have a very, very specific question about your particular job, and this is public. So, you know, we should probably move this to a private chat because we are speaking publicly about your job and everyone can see who you are. So I'll shift away from you if you don't mind. Let's continue this privately for your own privacy. And hey, we've got 20 people live on LinkedIn. Does anybody else have any other questions? Right. So please contact me privately. Let's continue this there. Any other questions about CX, UX, anything that I'm up to? Hey, everybody, join me tomorrow. Tomorrow's live stream should be hilarious. Do not drink tea while doing tomorrow's live stream. You might spit it across the room or choke on it. We are going to do live improv comedy, through a live stream like this. And we are going to do improv comedy. I invite you to watch it or to join in. And what's going to happen is I'm going to share a mural board rather, and invite everybody to it. You do not need a Mural account, and I'm using Mural's default canvas for empathy mapping. And I'm going to play the character of a very bad workshop facilitator, and we are going to take a comedy approach to terrible empathy mapping, just to be funny, to be silly, to be stupid, and to blow off some steam and laugh at ourselves. So of course, no charge as usual. Please join the live stream tomorrow. It'll be at 5 p.m. Italy time. Please adjust that for where you live. LinkedIn is so bad at events, it just says 5 p.m., but it doesn't tell you which time zone. So 5 p.m. Italy time, where I'm located, and adjust for all the countries where you are. But please join in for tomorrow for live improv comedy, where we are going to get really stupid with an empathy map. If there aren't any other questions, I'll wind down for today. Again, there's a 30 to 60-second delay between what I'm saying and what you guys hear. So I'll give you about 1 more minute. And if anyone has a question, please get it up there. Otherwise, we'll wrap up for today and we'll do this again next Tuesday. Scott is back. Scott, what book or video can I recommend to a young programmer who's interested in learning about UX or CX, looking for an overview? Okay, so somebody's a developer and they want to get more into UX or CX. There are lots of books that people tend to recommend. I think I've got a couple written down over here. Obviously, the first one that everyone always recommends, even though these aren't necessarily how-to books, they're still really important principle books. See if I can find them in my books. Come on, here we go. The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. Don't Make Me Think, which I think is by Paul Krug. I can't remember. I should know that one. The Elements of User Experience. And I forgot who that was. That's Jesse James Garrett. The Elements of User Experience. Is that the Jesse James Garrett book? No, yes, that is. The Jesse James Garrett book, I read part of, and I found that it was some parts of it were a little old. Let's see, the second edition is from 2010. So it's a little old, but again, it's more conceptual and it still makes some good points. So it's still a book worth looking into. I cannot recommend my own book in this case, only because my book is more about the strategy of CX and UX more strategically. So I think someone who's thinking about working in it is probably not ready yet for a more strategic book. I can't think of a lot of books, honestly, that I feel good about with respect to learning some how-tos. And those of you who are following me on LinkedIn know that I'm not happy right now with trade schools and boot camps. I believe most of them are junk. I hope to be disrupting that soon. So Scott, unfortunately, I do not have a lot of great answers for you there. I think a lot of stuff right now is kind of junky. Somebody from Nepal says, hello, I am from Nepal. I believe you. Umesh says, how's your tour of India? Umesh, you are just predicting the future. My tour of India was originally going to be March, but it got moved. So I will be visiting India in July of this year. I will be speaking, hopefully, at the Technical Agility Conference in Bangalore in July. And then I'm going to be surrounding that with hopefully lots of other things. So if you are somewhere in India and you would like to hear me speak, get in touch with me privately. Message me on LinkedIn, email me, whatever you want to do. I want to see if you've got a meetup or something that we can plan together where I can come to where you are. So Umesh, hopefully wherever you are, we will be meeting. My tour of India will be July. I hear I should bring an umbrella. Let's see if we have any other anonymous questions coming in. And Umesh was also ended up on our YouTube. No questions from YouTube. And tour of India, already told you, didn't happen. It will happen. Let's see. Okay, someone asked an anonymous question. Do you believe a career change from visual design to UX design is possible? I mostly believe it's possible if you can learn the right things and shift some of your mindset. I find that a lot of UI visual design people are very focused on the aesthetics of things, how pretty they are, how warm they are, how branded they are. And these things are important and you can't stop thinking about them. But when we're living in the UX side of things, we are really very, very focused on the psychology side of the experience, the steps, the processes, the customer's tasks. What are they trying to achieve and how do we make that happen quickly and efficiently for them? So I just find that for starters, it takes shifting that mindset away from how pretty or branded is this, and that can certainly come later, to how usable is this? How well does this help someone complete their task? And then, of course, it would really also require, like I said, lots of knowledge of cognitive psychology and learning some foundational UX principles like Gestalt principles, which you may have learned if you did art school. Sometimes those pop up there too. So I think UI people can transition into UX, but I also say that there are traits that a great UX and CX practitioners have that not everybody has. And I am going to look up what those are in my own book because I don't always remember them. Here they are. So I'm going to quickly read these out to you. This is from my book. 8 traits that great CX practitioners have. If you are great at these things, it might be a good career for you to transition into. If these sound like things you're not very strong in, you can either work on those things or maybe UX isn't going to be a great match for you. So number 1, empathy. Now, empathy right now is an overused buzzword and everybody's sure they have empathy, but empathy is really about seeing the customer's world through their eyes, through their reality, even if their reality doesn't match ours. They could be a religion we're not, they could be a political view we're not, they could have needs that we would never need, but we have to see their world through their eyes and take our ego out of it. And really, so that's what real empathy is more about. So that's vital. Number 2, an uncanny ability to predict possible outcomes. If some people who don't really have UX or CX in their soul, when they go to do some UX work, they really just map out what if everything went right? What if the user did this and this and this and this and everything went well in the end and they bought it? But they don't always remember to think about all the possible outcomes and all the possible outcomes of other people's ideas. So in the book, I tell a story about where I got overruled on something that I wanted to design because an engineer thought he had a better idea. And I said, here's what could happen if you send that live. And everybody told me I was being hysterical and dramatic. Of course, long story short, that's what happened. And that's because I have an uncanny ability to predict possible outcomes. More on that another day. Number 3, problem solving. All aspects of CX, including research, analysis, architecture, and design, involve serious problem finding and problem solving. I think visual design is sometimes less about problem solving. Yes, there are problems you have to solve, but I think it's not usually as much of a focus for visual designers as it is for us. That's one thing to look out for. Number 4, architecture. So much of CX is like architecture. How will space be used? How are people going to move through this? How do we make sure accessibility was taken into consideration? Not just sprinkled on at the end, but like really a core part of things. So a sense of architecture. Number 5, principles of cognitive psychology. I just said that. Number 6, and you can laugh at this one, but I say this is a great trait for people who work in CX or UX, an ability to manipulate people. Now, this sounds bad, but it can be used for good and not for evil, but it's an important thing to be able to do because CX architecture in its nature requires some manipulation. You're trying to help people go down a certain path and accomplish their tasks. So you've got to set up things that help them get there. Now, of course, evil companies set up things that take us somewhere else. But we want to be able to manipulate people. Also really helpful when you're giving presentations and people are messing with you and you got to fight them back. It's good to have a little bit of that side in you when used for good. You don't want to be that crappy, annoying, high ego, manipulative jerk. No one wants to work with that. Number 7, and this is kind of similar, lawyer-like skills. These are soft skills that are important for presentations, discussions, and times when you need to be a strong advocate for the customer. Because sometimes on a project, you might be the only person who cares about the customer. The other people just don't. Now, that's making a lot of people now say, well, we have to create empathy. You can't create empathy. If people don't care about the customer, just roll with that, and you'll have to find other ways to impress and compel these people. And number 8, powers of observation. That's a bit of cognitive psychology, curiosity, and possible outcomes combined with a great ability to read people and situations. So that's from the book, And that's 8 traits that I think are really important for someone working in UX or CX to have and have under control. You also hear people talking about emotional intelligence, which is a lot about self-awareness and how you behave and knowing your strengths and weaknesses and being able to stay under control and not fly off the handle when you get into fights. So this is my long answer of a career change from UX to UI, from UI to UX. And it might not have been what you were shooting for. You might have been shooting for step 1, put UX on your resume. Step 2, interview for a job. But I'm talking more about what you need to learn and who you need to be. And Umesh has to go. Thanks, Umesh. We may not have time for your questions, so ask that next time or send it privately. So again, I don't have easy. Step 1, you're a UI designer. Step 2, do this. Step 3, now you're a UX professional. It's really about getting the right education and having the right natural talents and personality aspects that would set you up for success, because certainly not everybody's good at everything. And if you are a visual designer, you have met people who were terrible visual designers, and you probably even met a few that went to art school and we're still terrible visual designers. So you know that even where someone has taken the time to get some education, sometimes that lack of natural talent or ability just is going to end that right there. So I think that's true for you, UX and CX as well, that it's important to have some natural talent and ability in certain areas that will help this be more relevant. So let's see, I don't see any other questions. Let's check YouTube. Nope. And Scott, thank you for joining in. Good to meet you. If there's no other questions, I'm going for an hour. We can wrap up for now. Remember, office hours is every Tuesday at roughly 4:30 p.m. Italian time. Adjust the time zone for where you are. You can also catch our scheduled podcasts. I just scheduled a new one coming up on Friday at our usual 5 p.m. Italian time, 11 a.m. on the East Coast of the USA. We're going to be talking about the 4 horsemen of bad CX and how you can vanquish them. And then we've got more stuff coming. I'm currently planning on January 17th. We're going to, and Monday, January 20, I don't have the times yet on these. We're going to be doing a podcast on empathy with our good friend. So I can't wait for him to talk to us more about empathy, especially because so many people keep thinking, yeah, empathy, you know, you can create it. Just get everybody together in a room and create empathy, and you can't. So we're going to talk about that. So I've been talking enough today. I also did 2 hours of audiobook narration earlier today to try to get my book cooking as an audiobook. You guys who follow me on LinkedIn know that that is a current project, and you also know it's going to take me most of this month, if not longer. So I'm working on it, but it means my voice is a little bit. That is why I've switched to hot tea. Herbal tea. I'm allergic to caffeine. Thanks to everybody for dropping by today. We had a great turnout. There's 24 of you here. Have a super week. If anything comes up, you know where to find me. Tag me on LinkedIn. Follow, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. All of the archives of these Ask Me Anythings do end up on YouTube. They do not end up on our podcasts. You can now find the Delta CX podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. But those are just the scheduled ones and not the office hours ones. So if you want to rehear any of the office hours, please do check the YouTube channel for those. That's where they're all archived. Thanks again to everybody. Have a great day. Good night to those in India. Thanks for staying up late with me. I think it's 10 p.m. there. So have yourself a nice cup of decaf tea and wind down for bed. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Don't forget, come on back tomorrow for our improv comedy adventure, where we will be really silly and make the silliest empathy map ever made on purpose.